Our focus settles on a woman checking into the Riverfront Inn during the evening hours of March 14th. Her name is Cynthia Brennan, a 29-year-old paralegal from Columbus. In one hand, she grips a leather briefcase. With the other, she guides a rolling suitcase behind her. Her appearance is professional and composed, though a careful observer might detect the subtle exhaustion etched on her features. She has traveled to Cleveland for a legal conference set to begin the following morning. The clerk assigns her room 412, a corner unit on the 4th floor with a partial view of the Cuyahoga River. Just 7 minutes later, another individual approaches the front desk. His name is Martin Kowalski. He is 37 years old, works in industrial supply distribution, and has also booked a room at the hotel, ostensibly for a trade show. The clerk hands him the key to room 414, only 2 doors from Cynthia Brennan. Martin makes a casual inquiry about the hotel gym's hours. A smile touches his lips. He seems amiable, entirely unremarkable. In less than 18 hours, hotel personnel would log the first noise complaint originating from room 412, and within 36 hours, they would discover the bathroom door had been locked from the inside. This trip was never about a legal conference. It was an elaborate and terrifying trap. Cynthia Brennan had been arranging the details of this trip for 6 weeks. The Midwest Paralegal Association's annual summit was being held at the Cleveland Convention Center. The agenda promised 3 days filled with workshops, networking functions, and the continuing education credits vital for maintaining her certification. Her firm had already paid the registration fee, and she had booked her room through the conference's own recommended accommodations portal. Every aspect of the arrangement was legitimate. Everything appeared to be perfectly in order. She had absolutely no cause to suspect that anything was amiss. Cynthia walked into the Riverfront Inn at 6:47 p.m. on March 14th. Her check-in was seamless. The lobby was alive with the movements of other conference attendees. She even recognized a few people from previous professional events. The sense of normalcy was complete and disarming. She took the elevator to the 4th floor, found her room, and dedicated the next hour to unpacking and reviewing her conference agenda. At 8:15 p.m., she placed an order with room service for a Caesar salad and sparkling water. She was determined to be sharp for the morning's keynote speech. The meal arrived at 8:42 p.m. She ate while poring over case briefs on her laptop. By 10 p.m., she was in bed, with her phone's alarm set for 6:30 a.m. She remained blissfully unaware that Martin Kowalski was just 2 doors down the hall. She had no way of comprehending that he had been systematically tracking her movements for the last 3 weeks. Martin Kowalski completed his check-in for room 414 at 6:54 p.m. He had with him only a small duffel bag, no briefcase, no rolling luggage. He waved off the bellhop's offer of assistance. He opted for the stairs instead of the elevator. When he arrived on the 4th floor, he paused inside the stairwell. He waited. He listened. At 7:03 p.m., he entered his room and immediately commenced his preparations. Martin Kowalski was not in Cleveland to attend a trade show. He had never held a position in industrial supply distribution. While the name on his driver's license was authentic, the employment history he had provided to the hotel was a complete fabrication. The credit card he presented to secure the reservation was legitimate, but it was linked to an account he maintained exclusively for situations of this nature. Martin Kowalski's plan had been in motion for a period far exceeding 6 weeks. The first noise complaint was logged at 11:47 a.m. on March 15th. A guest occupying room 4 to 10, directly below room 412, contacted the front desk. She described hearing loud thumping noises, the sound of furniture being dragged, and a heavy impact against the floor. The disturbance had been ongoing for 20 minutes. It was disruptive, she insisted. Could someone please investigate? The front desk assured her they would dispatch someone to check on the room. At 11:53 a.m., a housekeeper named Lorraine Vasquez knocked on the door of room 412. She received no answer. She knocked again. Still, there was only silence. She used her master key to open the door, noting that the interior security latch had not been engaged. She stepped inside to find the room empty. The bed was unmade, and an open laptop was sitting on the desk. A half-full bottle of water rested on the nightstand. Cynthia's briefcase leaned against the wall, but there was no trace of the guest herself. Lorraine checked inside the closet. She then peered into the bathroom. The bathroom door was closed, but it was not locked. She opened it to find it vacant. Lorraine logically assumed the guest had merely stepped out. She left a note apologizing for the intrusion and included a voucher for a complimentary beverage. She closed the door behind her and went back to her duties. At that point, the thumping from the room had stopped. The second complaint about noise was received at 4:32 p.m. This time, the call came from the guest in room 416, directly adjacent to room 412. The guest conveyed that he could hear muffled sounds coming through the shared wall. He described it as neither loud nor violent, but persistent and rhythmic, similar to someone moving furniture back and forth. It had been happening intermittently since early that afternoon. The front desk once again sent Lorraine Vasquez to the 4th floor. She got to room 412 at 4:38 p.m. She knocked. No answer. She knocked a second time, with more force. Still nothing. She inserted her master key, only to find that this time, the security latch was engaged. Someone was inside the room. Lorraine called through the door, "Housekeeping, is everything okay?" She was met with no response. She called out again, "Ma'am, I need to make sure you're all right." A voice then emerged from inside. It was female, muffled, and barely audible. "I'm fine, just not feeling well. Please don't disturb me." The voice on the other side of the door was insistent, and Lorraine found herself hesitating, though hotel policy was perfectly clear. Protocol dictated that if a guest requested privacy, staff were to honor it, barring any evidence of imminent danger. The voice, while faint, had been coherent enough. Following procedure, Lorraine documented the interaction in her log and walked away. Yet, the rhythmic sounds continued. By 9 p.m. on March 15th, an alarming fact had emerged. Cynthia Brennan had missed all of her scheduled conference sessions. Her firm had attempted to reach her mobile phone on multiple occasions, but every call was diverted to voicemail. Her supervisor sent a total of 3 text messages. There was no response. This behavior was entirely out of character for Cynthia. She was known for being meticulous, for being reliable. She was the person who always answered. At 9:47 p.m., growing increasingly concerned, Cynthia's supervisor placed a call to the Riverfront Inn, asking to be connected to room 412. The front desk transferred the call, which rang for 6 full cycles before connecting to the room's voicemail system. The supervisor left a message, the concern in his voice palpable, urging Cynthia to call back the moment she received it. Cynthia Brennan would never return the call. The situation escalated with the 3rd noise complaint, logged at 6:15 a.m. on March 16th. The guest in room 410, the very same woman who had complained the day before, contacted the front desk again. She reported the thumping had resumed at 5:30 a.m. and was now joined by a low, continuous sound. She described it as something like a hum, or possibly the sound of running water. It was faint, but it was persistent. She had been unable to get any sleep. The night manager, Daniel Frost, decided to personally go to the 4th floor and investigate. He arrived outside room 412 at 6:22 a.m. He knocked firmly. There was no answer. He knocked again, this time identifying himself as hotel management. The silence from within remained unbroken. He used his master key, only to find the security latch was engaged from the inside. He called through the door. "This is hotel management. We've had multiple noise complaints. I need to speak with you." Silence. He tried again. "Ma'am, if you don't respond, I'm going to have to enter the room for a safety check." A voice finally emanated from deep inside the room. It was female, audibly strained. "I'm in the bathroom. I'm sick. Please leave me alone." Daniel paused. Something about the voice felt wrong. It was too quiet, too forced. "Ma'am, I need to verify that you're okay. Can you open the door?" "I can't. I'm really sick. Please." At that moment, Daniel made a critical decision. He radioed security at 6:31 a.m. Hotel security officer Marcus Whitfield arrived on the 4th floor, where Daniel Frost quickly briefed him on the situation. There were the multiple noise complaints, the string of missed calls from the guest's employer, and now a voice from within the room that sounded deeply distressed. They had to perform a welfare check. Marcus used a specialized tool to disengage the security latch, and the heavy door swung open. The room was in a state of chaos. The bed was unmade, with clothes scattered haphazardly across the floor. The desk chair had been knocked on its side. Cynthia's briefcase had been forced open, its contents spilled across the carpet. Her laptop was gone. The bathroom door was closed. Marcus cautiously approached it. He knocked. Hotel security. "I'm coming in." He tried the handle. It was locked. He knocked again, with significantly more force this time. "Ma'am, I need you to open the door." A voice came from inside, female, weak, and barely a whisper. "I can't." Marcus stepped back, turning his gaze toward Daniel. Daniel gave a single, decisive nod. Marcus kicked the door. It took 3 hard impacts before the lock splintered and the door flew inward. Cynthia Brennan was on the floor of the bathroom, her back pressed against the tub. Her wrists had been tightly bound with zip ties. Her ankles were bound in the same brutal fashion. A wide strip of duct tape was stretched across her mouth. Her eyes were wide, with a silent, profound terror. She was alive, but only just. The Cleveland Police Department arrived at the Riverfront Inn at 6:47 a.m. Detective Calvin Shaw took command of the scene. While paramedics carefully worked to free Cynthia from her restraints, Shaw began securing the room as a crime scene. Cynthia was severely dehydrated, exhausted, and completely unable to speak in coherent sentences. She was transported to Metro Health Medical Center for immediate evaluation. Shaw launched his investigation right away. The room showed clear and unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. Furniture was displaced. Certain personal items were missing. Cynthia's laptop, her phone, her wallet, all gone. But her briefcase and conference materials remained untouched. This was not a simple robbery. Shaw carefully examined the bathroom. The zip ties were industrial grade. The duct tape was a standard hardware store variety. There were no discernible fingerprints on any of the smooth surfaces. Whoever had done this had been meticulous. Shaw then turned his focus to the hotel's security footage. The camera network covered the lobby, the elevators, and the entrances to the hallways on each floor, but critically, they did not cover the individual corridors where the rooms were located. The footage showed Cynthia entering the hotel at 6:47 p.m. on March 14th. It then showed her taking the elevator up to the 4th floor at 6:51 p.m. After that, she effectively disappeared from view. The cameras then captured Martin Kowalski entering the hotel at 6:54 p.m. The footage tracked him as he walked past the elevators, heading toward the stairwell. After that, he too vanished. Shaw immediately ran Martin Kowalski's name through the system. The result came back clean. No criminal record and no outstanding warrants. The address on his registration corresponded to a real apartment in Akron. The credit card had cleared without issue, and on the surface, all the details appeared to be in order. Detective Shaw's first move was to secure a complete guest manifest for the hotel's 4th floor. Among the names, one stood out: Martin Kowalski. He was registered to room 414, situated just 2 doors from Cynthia Brennan's. At 8:15 that morning, Detective Shaw, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, stood outside room 414. His first knock went unanswered. He knocked once more, clearly identifying himself as law enforcement. Again, there was only silence. At that point, Detective Shaw made the call to hotel management. They confirmed that Martin Kowalski was still a registered guest. He had not checked out. A check of the electronic keycard system revealed his last activity: entry into his room at 11:52 p.m. on March 15th. Armed with a freshly issued warrant, Shaw had hotel security breach the room's seal at 9:03 a.m. What they found inside was a void. The room was empty, the bed untouched. There was an absolute absence of life. No personal belongings, no luggage, no toiletries. The room presented itself as a sterile, untouched space, a blatant contradiction to the security footage that showed Martin Kowalski entering with a duffel bag. The question hung in the air: where was it? Shaw ordered a full forensic sweep of both rooms. Meanwhile, at Metro Health Medical Center, Cynthia Brennan was slowly emerging from her ordeal. Her body bore the marks of being restrained for more than 30 hours. She was suffering from severe dehydration, alongside a number of minor but telling injuries. There were deep contusions on her wrists and ankles, and a cut scored her forehead where she had hit the hard tile of the bathroom floor. But through it all, she was conscious. And more importantly, she was coherent. Detective Shaw arrived at her hospital room at 10:30 a.m., hoping she could fill in the terrifying blanks. Cynthia began to piece together the nightmare for him. She recalled retiring for the night at 10 p.m. on March 14th, only to be jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of her room door opening. Her first thought was housekeeping, so she called out. There was no answer. As she sat up in bed, her eyes adjusted enough to see a silhouette moving silently through the dark. Before a scream could escape her lips, a hand was pressed hard against her mouth. A man's voice, unsettlingly calm, whispered for her not to make a sound. She fought back, a desperate, primal struggle, but he was far stronger. He propelled her into the bathroom, where he quickly restrained her wrists and ankles with zip ties. A strip of duct tape was placed over her mouth. He told her then, in that same detached voice, that he wasn't going to harm her, he just needed time. Time for what, she wondered, but he offered no explanation. He systematically gathered her belongings, her laptop, her phone, and her wallet. Then he exited the small room, and she heard the distinct sound of the bathroom door being locked from the outside. Trapped in the darkness, she could only listen. She heard him moving about the hotel room, the sound of furniture being rearranged, followed by the steady, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard. Hours bled into one another. She had no way of knowing how much time had elapsed. Then, a sharp knock at the door, and a woman's voice calling out, "Housekeeping." A surge of hope drove Cynthia to make as much noise as she could, but the thick tape rendered her efforts into faint, unintelligible sounds. Soon, she heard the housekeeper's cart roll away. The passage of time once again became a blur. She had lost all conception of time, adrift in a sea of thirst and fear. Then, another knock, this time more authoritative. A man's voice announced he was with hotel management. Cynthia again struggled to make any sound possible, a desperate, muffled plea. From the other side of the door, she heard the man's voice. It was a low, distorted sound, a strange attempt to mimic her, telling the staff that she was unwell and wished to be left undisturbed. Much later, the lock on the bathroom door turned. The man unlocked the door and stood in the frame, his eyes on her. He remained completely silent. Then, without a word, he backed out and locked the door once more. Throughout the entire ordeal, she never once saw his face. Detective Shaw pushed for a description, anything she might have noticed. He was of average height and build, she recalled, and had been wearing gloves and a dark jacket. But it was his voice that stood out, calm, measured, almost polite, a quality that stood in horrifying contrast to his actions. Detective Shaw then asked the crucial question, had she ever seen the man before? Cynthia shook her head. He was a total stranger to her. She had no idea who he could be. It was then that Shaw presented her with a photograph he'd retrieved from the hotel's registration system. It was the driver's license photo of Martin Kowalski. As Cynthia stared at the face, her hands began to tremble. That's him. On March 17th, the investigation's forensic team delivered their first major breakthrough. During their processing of room 414, technicians discovered faint traces of adhesive residue on the desk. The evidence suggested that some piece of equipment, probably a laptop, had been secured there. In the closet, they also recovered fibers that were consistent with those from a duffel bag. The most critical piece of evidence came from the bathroom faucet, a single, clear fingerprint. The print was a direct match to Martin Kowalski's official records. But by then, Martin Kowalski had disappeared without a trace. Shaw delved deeper into Kowalski's background. The address he had listed in Akron was a real apartment, but a check revealed it had been vacant for 3 months. The landlord had never even heard the name Martin Kowalski. The credit card, investigators discovered, was linked to an account established 6 months before, all of it based on fraudulent documents. The driver's license was a genuine document, but the identity it represented, the name, the address, the date of birth, was entirely fictitious. In essence, Martin Kowalski did not exist. He was a ghost. Faced with this constructed identity, Shaw broadened the parameters of the investigation. He subpoenaed the digital records from the conference's online booking portal. There, he unearthed a startling detail. Cynthia Brennan's room, number 412, had not been randomly assigned. It had been specifically requested. The reservation was made under her name and with her credit card information, but the transaction originated from an IP address that belonged neither to her home nor her office. Shaw traced the digital trail, and it led him to a public library in Akron. He pulled the library's security footage for that date. On the video from January 23rd, 6 weeks prior to the conference, a man with the same physical description as Martin Kowalski was recorded using a public computer for exactly 47 minutes. The time frame of his computer session corresponded precisely with the electronic record of the hotel booking transaction. The evidence was undeniable. The man known as Martin Kowalski had been orchestrating this attack for weeks, but the motive remained a mystery. Why target Cynthia Brennan? To find the answer, Shaw had to delve into her life. His investigation led him to Cynthia's social media presence. Her Facebook profile was locked down, shielded by privacy settings, but her LinkedIn page was entirely public. It was a detailed map of her professional life, outlining her employment history, her certifications, and, most critically, her consistent attendance at previous paralegal conferences. The file mentioned the Cleveland Summit, an event just on the horizon. This triggered a new line of inquiry for Detective Shaw, who began to search for other professional women who had moved through the circuits of similar conferences. The digital trail led him to 3 individuals, and each of them, within the past year, had filed a police report for theft. The items reported missing were always the same: laptops, phones, wallets. The locations were also eerily consistent. All had been staying in hotels situated near conference venues. A deeper thread connected their stories, a shared, unsettling feeling that someone had been inside their rooms while they were away. Yet, none had suffered physical harm. None had reported being bound or restrained. Cynthia Brennan was the first to break that pattern. With her, the assailants' methods were clearly escalating. Armed with this emerging profile, Shaw issued a warrant for the arrest of Martin Kowalski, citing charges of kidnapping, assault, theft, and identity fraud. He cast a wide net, alerting law enforcement agencies across Ohio and its neighboring states, and released Kowalski's photograph to the media, turning the investigation public. The public response was almost instantaneous. On March 19th, a call came into the tip line from a woman in Pittsburgh. She recognized the face in the photograph. She recalled meeting a man who matched that exact description at a hotel bar back in February. He had been disarmingly friendly, effortlessly charming. He had shown a keen interest in her work. She was an accountant in town for a tax seminar. In a moment of professional courtesy, she had given him her business card. 2 days later, her laptop was gone, stolen from the presumed security of her hotel room. On March 20th, another call, this time from Indianapolis. The story was a chilling echo of the first. A hotel bar, a seemingly innocent conversation, and another stolen laptop. Then, on March 21st, a third woman called, this one from Columbus. She had encountered Martin Kowalski in a coffee shop near the convention center. He had complimented the badge she wore for the conference. They had talked for no more than 15 minutes. By the next morning, her phone had vanished. As Shaw compiled the reports, the horrifying picture became clear. Martin Kowalski wasn't fixated on Cynthia Brennan alone. His hunting ground was conferences, and his prey was professional women traveling by themselves. He had a method: identify them, track their movements, and steal their most valuable devices. But the attack on Cynthia represented a fundamental shift. He hadn't merely stolen from her, he had physically restrained her. He had held her captive. Shaw knew he had to find this man before his predatory evolution took another, possibly fatal, step. The break in the case came on March 24th. A patrol officer in Toledo, Ohio, spotted a man whose description perfectly matched Martin Kowalski's. The suspect was at a bus station, in the process of purchasing a ticket to Detroit. The officer moved to approach. The man bolted. A chase ensued, spanning 3 city blocks before other officers managed to tackle him just outside a convenience store. A search of his duffel bag revealed its contents: 4 laptops, 3 phones, and a disturbing collection of identification documents, each belonging to a different woman. The man they had in custody, however, was not Martin Kowalski. His true name was Eugene Talbot. He was 41 years old. With a criminal history that stretched back to 2009, a long and consistent record of fraud, identity theft, and burglary. He had already served 2 sentences in prison and had been released just 18 months prior. The identity of Martin Kowalski was a meticulous fabrication, a mask created by Eugene Talbot specifically for preying on conference attendees. Detective Shaw arrived in Toledo at 7 p.m. that evening. The interrogation commenced at 7:30 p.m. For the first 2 hours, Talbot offered nothing but a wall of silence. On the strict advice of his lawyer, Shaw methodically laid out the case against him. The hotel records, the stark images from surveillance footage, the recovered devices, the undeniable fingerprint evidence. Talbot's eyes remained fixed on the table. Shaw then began to detail the ordeal of Cynthia Brennan, how she was discovered, bound with zip ties in a locked bathroom, how she had been held for more than 30 agonizing hours, how she was utterly convinced she was going to die. Throughout the harrowing account, Talbot's expression remained a cold, emotionless blank. Shaw leaned in, his voice low and deliberate. He posed a single, pivotal question. Why did you restrain her? The others. You just took their things and left. What was different about Cynthia Brennan? For the first time, Talbot looked up, his gaze meeting the detective's. He spoke. She woke up. From that point, Eugene Talbot's confession unspooled, detailing 17 thefts committed across 6 states over the course of the last year. He had refined his system to an art, identifying professional women at conferences, meticulously learning their schedules, and then booking rooms within the very same hotels they occupied. He would then employ cloned keycards to gain entry to their rooms while they were attending their professional events. His targets were simple: laptops, phones, and any cash or credit cards he could quickly locate. The devices were sold online. The bank accounts were systematically drained. Then, he would vanish, moving on to the next city, the next conference. It was an efficient operation. It was remarkably low risk. It was highly profitable. But the variable he never accounted for was Cynthia Brennan waking up. Talbot had slipped into her room at 11:34 p.m. on the night of March 14th. He used a cloned keycard, a digital phantom he had engineered from hotel security data he'd hacked 3 days before. He had operated under the assumption that she would be asleep. And she was. But as he pushed the door open, a faint creak echoed in the silent room. She stirred. She sat up. In that moment, he was seized by panic. He couldn't allow her to see his face. He could not let her scream for help. His only instinct was to incapacitate her. He restrained her, then forced her into the bathroom and locked the door. Only then did he take what he came for. Her laptop contained sensitive client case files he speculated might hold some value. Her phone was a gateway to her banking applications. Her wallet contained a full slate of credit cards. He then spent the next several hours trapped in a state of indecision, wrestling with what to do next. Letting her go was not an option. She had seen him. She could provide a positive identification, yet Harming her physically was never a part of his meticulously crafted system. And so, he simply waited. He monitored the hotel room door. When housekeeping knocked, he answered, skillfully mimicking Cynthia's voice to deflect suspicion. He was buying himself time, desperately trying to formulate a plan, but he eventually realized his time was running out. The hotel staff was becoming increasingly wary. Cynthia's employer had begun calling, frantic. His options had dwindled to nothing. He finally fled through the stairwell at 2:17 a.m. On the morning of March 16th, he carried the duffel bag filled with his stolen electronics. He walked directly to the bus station, where he purchased a one-way ticket to Toledo. He operated under the chilling certainty that Cynthia would be discovered within hours, and on this point, he was not mistaken. Investigators later pressed Talbot on a crucial question. After the initial theft, why had he not simply vanished? What compulsion drove him to target women at these professional gatherings? Talbot's response was a disarmingly simple shrug. It was, he claimed, easy. The state formally brought its case against Eugene Talbot, 17 counts of burglary, a single, harrowing count of kidnapping, one charge of aggravated assault, and a complex web of indictments for identity fraud and theft. Denied any possibility of bail, he remained in custody. The wheels of justice began to turn on September 9, 2025. The prosecution constructed an overwhelming case built on stark surveillance footage, meticulous forensic data, and the testimony of 17 different victims. On September 12th, Cynthia Brennan took the stand to face her attacker. She recounted the disorienting terror of waking to find an unknown man standing in her hotel room. She described the searing pain of plastic zip ties as they cut into the flesh of her wrists. She spoke of the long, silent hours of psychological torment she endured as a prisoner inside the locked bathroom. In response, the defense argued that Talbot's true intentions were never to inflict harm. His actions concerning Cynthia, they claimed, were the consequence of a sudden panic, not a calculated, premeditated crime. A documented history of untreated mental health issues was presented to the court. They painted a picture of a man shaped by a childhood of poverty. He had made terrible mistakes, they conceded, but insisted he was not the violent predator the prosecution portrayed. The prosecution's rebuttal was devastating in its simplicity, delivered in one pointed line: panic doesn't explain 36 hours of captivity. For 9 hours, the jury deliberated behind closed doors. On September 16th, they returned with their unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Eugene Talbot was sentenced to serve 23 years in a federal penitentiary. Cynthia Brennan, in May of 2025, returned to her career. She successfully completed her paralegal certification. She would later testify before a cybersecurity task force, her personal account serving as a stark warning about the specific dangers of digital identity theft targeting conference attendees. Her powerful testimony became a catalyst for systemic change, leading to new security protocols at major hotel chains, including vastly enhanced keycard encryption, the mandatory installation of security camera coverage in every hallway, and immediate welfare checks for any guests who unexpectedly miss scheduled events. The conference industry as a whole was compelled to implement new safety guidelines. Attendee information was no longer made publicly accessible through conference websites. As a new standard, hotel room numbers would never again be printed directly on registration materials. The security training for hotel staff was expanded to include recognizing the subtle indicators of a potential abduction or a situation of coercion. Cynthia still travels for conferences. She still stays in hotels, but her routine is forever changed. She now carries a portable door lock, and she methodically inspects her room before allowing herself to settle in. She trusts her own instincts now, implicitly. She survived. In the end, that is the only truth that matters. The Riverfront Hotel installed security cameras in all of its hallways on March 30th, 2025. Room 412 was sealed off, taken out of service for 3 weeks while investigators meticulously completed their work. When the room finally reopened, hotel management made a quiet, unpublicized decision to remove it from all online booking systems. While guests can still request the room specifically, very few ever do. The leather briefcase Cynthia carried that night now sits on a shelf in her office. She never uses it for work anymore, but she keeps it. It serves as a constant reminder that normalcy is fragile, that safety is never guaranteed, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing a person can do is simply wake up. Here's a powerful educational message drawn from this true story. She did everything right, it still happened. Cynthia Brennan wasn't reckless. She wasn't distracted. She wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was doing her job. She booked through official channels. She stayed in a recommended hotel. She ate dinner, reviewed her notes, set her alarm, and went to sleep exactly the way millions of professionals do every single night across this country. And she still woke up to a stranger's hand over her mouth. This is what we need to understand. Predators don't target carelessness. They target routine. They study your LinkedIn. They book the room 2 doors down. They smile at the front desk. They wait. Eugene Talbot operated across 6 states, 17 victims, for over a year because every system around him chose comfort over caution. Cynthia survived, but survival shouldn't be the benchmark. Here is what must change. Never print room numbers on registration materials. Always install hallway cameras. Always perform welfare checks on unreachable guests. Always trust the knock that feels wrong. And if you're traveling alone, tell someone where you are, every single day. Safety isn't fear. Safety is the quiet, disciplined act of refusing to be invisible. Cynthia still travels. She still attends conferences. She just travels smarter. So can you.